Welcome to Serial Killers with Ben Carter. I'm your host, Ben Carter. Charles Ng was a man of many faces, a cipher wrapped in an enigma, shrouded in a dark, tumultuous past. Born in Hong Kong in 1960, he was a bright child, yet a rebellious one. His father, a stern disciplinarian, sent him to an English boarding school in an attempt to straighten him out, but to no avail. By the time he was 18, Charles was on his way to the United States, where he soon enlisted in the Marine Corps. This, too, was far from smooth sailing. Ng was charged with theft of heavy weaponry and served time in a military prison. But it was after his release that his life took a truly sinister turn. He moved to Northern California, where he met Leonard Lake, a man with an equally dark past. Together they would form a partnership that resulted in one of the most horrifying crime sprees in American history. What drove Charles Ng to such depths of depravity? Some point to his upbringing, to the strict, harsh discipline of his father. Others speculate that his time in the military, particularly his stint in prison, may have played a role. Whatever the reasons, the path that Ng took was one marked by violence, destruction, and a shocking disregard for human life. In the rural expanses of Calaveras County, Ng and Lake embarked on a reign of terror that would last for over a year. In a makeshift dungeon on Lake's secluded property, they held their victims captive, subjecting them to unimaginable horrors before brutally ending their lives. The authorities were initially oblivious to the pair's heinous activities. It wasn't until a failed shoplifting attempt led to Ng's arrest that the grim reality began to unravel. When police searched Lake's property, they discovered a scene straight out of a horror film. A hidden bunker containing videotapes of the gruesome crimes, along with personal belongings of numerous missing persons. As the evidence mounted, so did the body count. Investigators eventually attributed a dozen murders to Ng and Lake. Yet, even as he faced trial and the prospect of the death penalty, Ng remained unrepentant, denying his guilt and blaming his crimes on Lake. The case of Charles Ng is a chilling reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink. It's a story of a man who, time and again, chose a path of violence and destruction, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. It's a story that sends shivers down the spine, a stark warning of the evil that can lurk beneath the surface of the seemingly ordinary. Calaveras County, Northern California, in the 1980s, was a world away from the bustling cities of Los Angeles or San Francisco. The region was predominantly rural, a patchwork of rugged mountains, dense forests, and wide-open pastures, studded with small towns. It was a place where people went to escape the pressures of urban life, to live closer to nature, and to enjoy the peace and quiet that the countryside had to offer. Yet, beneath this idyllic veneer, a nightmare was unfolding, one that would shock the nation and leave an indelible scar on the community. The social climate of the era was one of change and uncertainty. The country was still reeling from the aftermath of the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. The economy was in a slump, and the gap between the rich and the poor was widening. In rural areas like Calaveras County, many people were struggling to make ends meet. It was a time of disillusionment and frustration, a fertile breeding ground for resentment and anger. Charles Ng and Leonard Lake exploited this unease, using the isolation of the countryside to their advantage. Their property was nestled deep in the woods, hidden from prying eyes, a chilling embodiment of the saying, "out of sight, out of mind." The few people who did come into contact with them found them to be odd, but not necessarily dangerous. After all, the county was full of eccentrics, those who had chosen to step away from mainstream society and live by their own rules. Yet, there was more to this than simple idiosyncrasy. Lake and Ng were not harmless hermits but predators, lurking in the shadows. They were wolves in sheep's clothing, their outward normality masking a chilling reality. They did not live in seclusion for peace or tranquility, but to hide their horrific crimes, and for over a year they succeeded. The isolation of the area, the general trust and respect for privacy among the community allowed Ng and Lake to carry out their murderous spree without detection. The pair's reign of terror was a cruel betrayal of the very values that had attracted people to Calaveras County in the first place. The close-knit community was shattered, the sense of safety and tranquility forever tarnished. The case of Charles Ng serves as a stark reminder that evil can exist anywhere, even in the most unexpected of places. It reminds us that appearances can be deceptive and that beneath the surface, darkness can lurk. It's a chilling tale of how, in the wrong hands, the very things that make a place appealing, its isolation, tranquility, and sense of community, can be twisted and turned into instruments of terror. The victims of Charles Ng and Leonard Lake were ordinary people leading ordinary lives. They were people whose families and friends had little reason to worry when they didn't hear from them for a day or two. But as the days turned into weeks and then into months, the horrifying reality began to set in. One of the first known victims was Donald Giulietti, a 37-year-old San Francisco disc jockey. He had a wide circle of friends who became alarmed when he suddenly stopped answering his phone. His body was later found on their property, a grim testament to the duo's escalating violence. There was Harvey Dubbs and his wife Deborah, along with their baby son Sean. The Dubbs family had responded to an advertisement placed by Lake for a VCR. When they arrived at the property, they were held captive, tortured, and killed. The same fate befell Paul Cosner, a used car dealer who had met Lake when he came to look at a vehicle. He too was lured to the property, never to be seen again. Cosner's disappearance was initially treated as a missing person case, with authorities believing he may have left on his own accord. It wasn't until later that his connection to Lake and Ng was established. Then there were the women who were abducted and used as sex slaves before their lives were brutally extinguished. Brenda O'Connor, a neighbor of Lake and Ng, disappeared along with her husband, Lonnie Bond, and their baby son, Lonnie Jr. Each victim was subjected to indescribable horrors, their final moments marked by fear, pain, and degradation. Their lives were treated as nothing more than commodities to be used and discarded at will by Ng and Lake. These are just a few of the known victims. There were at least 11 in total, but the true number may never be known. Many of the victims were not immediately reported missing, given their transient lifestyles or lack of close family ties. This allowed Ng and Lake to continue their gruesome activities undetected for an extended period of time. It's a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of depravity to which some human beings can sink. Each victim was a person with hopes, dreams, and loved ones. They were people who had the misfortune of crossing paths with two of the most cold-blooded killers in American history. Their stories serve as a stark warning of the dangers that can lurk behind the most unassuming of facades. As the body count rose, Lake and Ng's operation grew increasingly audacious. They began to leave behind more evidence, their brazenness a sign of their total disregard for the lives they were extinguishing. Yet it was this very audacity that would ultimately lead to their downfall. In 1985, a shoplifting incident at a hardware store in San Francisco would provide the first break in the case. Ng had been caught attempting to steal a vice, and in the ensuing chaos, he fled the scene, leaving Lake to handle the situation. Lake presented a driver's license in the name of Scott Stapley, but the store clerk was suspicious and called the police. When the authorities arrived, they found a .22 caliber revolver with a silencer in Lake's vehicle, which was registered under the name Paul Cosner. Lake was arrested on the spot. Upon further investigation, they discovered that both Scott Stapley and Paul Cosner were missing persons linked to Lake and Ng. While Lake was held in police custody, a search warrant was obtained for the cabin in Calaveras County. What they discovered there was beyond their worst expectations. Buried in the property were charred human remains, personal belongings of several missing persons, and videotapes that documented the horrific abuse inflicted upon the victims. Meanwhile, Lake swallowed cyanide pills he had sewn into his clothes and died 4 days later. Ng had fled to Canada, triggering an international manhunt. He was eventually captured in Calgary after getting caught shoplifting again, this time for food and supplies. The investigation into Lake and Ng's crimes was a mammoth task. The gruesome evidence uncovered at the cabin, along with the information provided by the store clerk in San Francisco, painted a chilling picture of a killing spree that had spanned at least 2 years. The police were faced with the grim task of identifying the victims, tracing their last movements, and piecing together the chilling timeline of their deaths. With each new revelation, the full horror of Lake and Ng's crimes became more apparent, and the focus of the investigation shifted from simply catching the killers to seeking justice for their victims. The discovery of the cabin, the evidence within, and the subsequent manhunt for Ng were crucial turning points in the case. They marked the beginning of the end for one of the most notorious killing teams in American history, setting the stage for a trial that would captivate the nation and finally give a voice to the victims. But the path to justice would be anything but straightforward. In the wake of the horrifying discoveries at the cabin, a clearer picture of the two perpetrators, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, began to form. The police and the FBI launched an intensive investigation into their backgrounds, seeking to understand the twisted minds that could commit such heinous acts. Lake, a Vietnam veteran with a history of mental instability, was known for his obsession with survivalism and his disturbing fantasies about a post-apocalyptic world. These fantasies often featured a harem of women, enslaved for his pleasure, a chilling echo of the realities discovered at the cabin. Ng, on the other hand, was a former Marine, dishonorably discharged for theft. His childhood in Hong Kong was reportedly marked by strict discipline and physical abuse. Upon moving to the United States, Ng had quickly fallen into a life of petty crime, leading him to cross paths with Leonard Lake. Now, there was a clear pattern that emerged from their pasts. Both men had histories of antisocial behavior, both had military backgrounds, and both had a shared fascination with power, control, and the darker side of human nature. The behavioral analysis of the FBI profilers suggested the existence of a sadomasochistic dynamic between Lake and Ng. Lake, the dominant one, appeared to have been the mastermind behind the killings, while Ng, though submissive to Lake, actively participated and seemed to derive a perverse pleasure from the abuse and torture. These observations lined up with what was found on videotapes discovered at the cabin. The tapes showed Ng as a willing participant, often taking on an active role in the torture and abuse of the victims. This was a crucial piece of evidence, as it directly implicated Ng in the killings and countered any claims that he was merely an unwilling accomplice. In Ng's case, a disturbing pattern of behavior emerged, marked by aggression, theft, and a complete disregard for human life. His actions displayed a chilling lack of empathy, a characteristic often seen in sociopaths. Meanwhile, the international manhunt for Ng continued. His capture was critical, not just to bring justice for the victims, but also to prevent further loss of life. Despite the extensive efforts of law enforcement, Ng managed to evade capture for over a month, hiding out in Canada before finally being apprehended in Calgary. The intricate web of murder and deception woven by Lake and Ng was beginning to unravel. With Ng's capture, the stage was set for a trial that promised to expose the full extent of their monstrous crimes. Yet even as the net closed around Ng, there were still many unanswered questions about the depth and extent of their depraved killing spree. As the investigation began, the physical evidence at the crime scene was as ghastly as it was revealing. The remote cabin and its surrounding area were a macabre tableau of human suffering and death. Investigators found numerous shallow graves, each containing charred and dismembered remains. The evidence suggested a chillingly meticulous process of murder, torture, and disposal. Forensics teams worked tirelessly, sifting through soil and rubble, piecing together fragments of bone and teeth that had been scattered by Lake's hasty attempts to conceal his crimes. They were able to identify 11 victims, establishing a heartbreaking link between the remains and missing persons reports. Yet, the true number of victims remained elusive, as other bodies were too badly damaged or incomplete to be positively identified. In one of the crucial breakthroughs of the case, investigators discovered a tool shed on the property. Inside, they found a chilling assortment of implements used in the torture and murder of the victims. Alongside these were several videotapes that would become pivotal to the prosecution's case. These tapes, horrifying in their content, showed Lake and Ng tormenting their victims. They offered a monstrous glimpse into the depraved minds of the killers, and importantly, they served as irrefutable proof of Ng's active participation in the crimes. It was no longer feasible for him to claim that he was merely an unwilling accomplice. He was seen on tape, relishing in the torture and degradation of the victims, his apathy towards their suffering revealing a chilling lack of empathy. The forensic evidence, while disturbing, was instrumental in the case against Ng. DNA analysis, in particular, proved vital. Blood and tissue samples collected from the cabin and the murder weapons matched Ng's DNA, further tying him to the crime scene. In addition, witness testimonies began to trickle in. These accounts, often from individuals who had narrowly escaped the clutches of Lake and Ung, provided further evidence of the duo's reign of terror. They painted a horrifying picture of manipulation, abuse, and psychological torture, corroborating the evidence found at the cabin. As the evidence against Ung mounted, it became clear that this was not a case of a submissive partner led astray by a dominant one. Charles Eng was an active participant, a willing accomplice in a horrifying spree of violence and murder. The stage was set for a trial that would shake the world, a trial that promised to expose the depths of Ung's depravity. In the wake of the mounting evidence, Ung's capture was imminent. He fled to Canada, but his freedom was short-lived. After a botched shoplifting attempt in Calgary, he was arrested. His extradition back to the United States sparked a legal battle that lasted several years, but eventually he was returned to face his crimes. The trial of Charles Eng began in October 1998, over a decade after the discovery of the horrors at the cabin. The proceedings were fraught with delays and complications, primarily due to Ung's insistence on representing himself. His disruptive behavior, coupled with long, rambling speeches and constant objections, created a tense atmosphere in the courtroom. But the evidence was overwhelming. The videotapes, the DNA, the witness testimonies, all pointed to one undeniable truth. Charles Eng was a murderer. The trial was one of the most expensive in California history, costing taxpayers over $20 million. For those who had been following the case, it was a source of morbid fascination, the gruesome details dominating headlines and news broadcasts. The courtroom was often filled to capacity, with spectators lining up early in the morning to secure a seat. The public reaction to the trial and to Ung was one of shock and revulsion. The brutality of his crimes, the sheer inhumanity of his actions, sent waves of disgust and fear through communities. People struggled to comprehend how such a monster could live among them, how he could commit such atrocities without detection for so long. Ung maintained his innocence throughout the trial, claiming he was merely a bystander, forced into participation by Lake. But the jury was not swayed by his pleas. The evidence was incontrovertible. After 8 months, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty on 11 counts of murder. The trial of Charles Eng laid bare the depths of his depravity, exposing a man who took perverse pleasure in the suffering of others. It served as a chilling reminder of the evil that can lurk in the most unexpected places, hidden behind the veneer of normalcy. As the gavel fell on his sentencing, it marked the end of a reign of terror that had lasted for years, bringing closure to the families of the victims and a sense of justice to a community that had been forever scarred by his monstrous acts. Understanding the complex psychology behind Charles Eng's heinous acts is a difficult task. Yet, criminologists, psychologists, and other experts have sought to delve into his mind, to uncover the possible motivations, past traumas, and psychological underpinnings of his behavior. Ung was born into a strict disciplinarian family in Hong Kong. His father, a stern figure, was known to mete out harsh punishments. This upbringing may have set the stage for Ung's later violent behavior. However, caution is urged in attributing these acts solely to childhood experiences. Many individuals experience harsh upbringings, yet do not resort to violence or criminal behavior. While it may have been a contributing factor, it does not serve as an explanation or excuse for his actions. Psychologists suggest that Ung may have held a deep-seated resentment and anger toward society. Following a string of personal failures, his expulsion from school, dismissal from the Marines, and inability to sustain meaningful relationships, his resentment may have turned violent. As a sociopath, Ung lacked empathy for his victims. His crimes were not impulsive but planned, pointing to a sadistic streak. He derived pleasure from the suffering of others, as evidenced by the disturbing videotapes found at the cabin. Eng's relationship with Leonard Lake is a significant piece of the puzzle. Lake was the dominant figure in their partnership, with Ung often described as his subservient accomplice. Yet it's clear that Ung was not merely a passive participant in their crimes. He actively engaged in the torture and murder of their victims. This suggests a deep-seated desire to exert power and control, possibly stemming from feelings of inadequacy and a desire to assert dominance. Ng's insistence on self-representation during his trial may also provide insight into his psyche. It can be seen as a desperate attempt to control the narrative, to assert his power in a situation where, ultimately, he had none. His disruptive behavior, constant objections, and rambling speeches were manifestations of this desire to assert control. In attempting to understand Charles Ng, one must tread carefully. While examining his past and psychological profile can provide context, it does not excuse or justify his heinous crimes. It serves to remind us of the complex nature of human behavior, the disturbing capacity for evil within some individuals, and the necessity of vigilance in recognizing and addressing such behavior before it escalates to the level of horror that Ng and Lake inflicted upon their victims. The aftermath of Ng's trial sent ripples through the community. The small town of Wilseyville, where the crimes took place, was forever marked by the atrocities committed. The community was shattered, its sense of safety and tranquility irrevocably shattered. Residents remember the shock and fear as the grisly details of the crimes were revealed, the disbelief that such horrors could have been perpetrated in their midst. The survivors, the family and friends of the victims, were left to grapple with an incalculable loss. They were forced to confront the harsh reality that their loved ones had been subjected to unimaginable cruelty. Many of them attended the trial, seeking answers and closure. Some found a measure of solace in Ng's conviction, but for many, the wounds were too deep, the pain too raw. The echoes of Ng's crimes continue to reverberate in their lives, a haunting reminder of the evil that men can do. The media attention was intense. The case made headlines across the world, sparking a flurry of coverage that put the spotlight on the dark underbelly of human nature. The public was both horrified and fascinated by the details of the case. The media circus surrounding the trial thrust the small town of Wilseyville into the national limelight, a status it neither sought nor welcomed. The legacy of Charles Ng is a chilling reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink. His name has become synonymous with a particular brand of evil, a reminder of the capacity for cruelty that lurks within some individuals. His crimes have been the subject of numerous books and documentaries, their horror retold time and again as a stark cautionary tale. In the end, the story of Charles Ng serves as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance. It underscores the necessity of taking early signs of sociopathic and violent behavior seriously, of not turning a blind eye to the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. It's a sobering testament to the devastation that such individuals can wreak if left unchecked. Though justice was served in Ng's case, the scars left behind are deep and enduring. The community, the survivors, and the families of the victims continue to grapple with the aftermath of his crimes, seeking healing and understanding in the shadow of an unimaginable horror. The legacy of Charles Ng is one of pain and loss, a grim testament to the darkness that can reside within the human heart. Yet in the face of this chilling legacy, there are still unanswered questions that linger, stirring the waters of speculation. For all the evidence found and testimonies heard, the full extent of Ng's crimes may never be known. How many victims are there really? Could there be other undiscovered crime scenes? These are questions that continue to haunt investigators and those who have followed the case closely. And then there's the question of Ng's accomplice, Leonard Lake, who took his own life before he could be brought to trial. What more could he have revealed had he lived to stand trial alongside Ng? Could he have shed light on the extent of their crimes, or possibly implicated others in their horrific acts? His death left a gaping hole in the narrative of this gruesome tale, a void filled with speculative theories and haunting possibilities. Even the motives behind Ng and Lake's horrific acts are still a subject of debate. While some attribute their crimes to an inherent sadistic nature, others suggest that their brutal acts were a perverse form of rebellion against societal norms. Some psychologists have even argued that the duo's crimes may be indicative of a shared psychopathy, a rare and chilling phenomenon that can lead to extreme violence when two such individuals come together. And what of the potential warning signs? Were there missed opportunities to intervene before Ng and Lake's reign of terror escalated to such horrifying proportions? Could a more proactive approach to Ng's earlier crimes have prevented the tragedies that were to follow? The chilling possibility that some of their victims might have been spared is a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance and intervention in the face of potential danger. The enduring legacy of Charles Ng is not just one of horror and devastation, but also one of caution and reflection. It's a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human heart, and the catastrophic consequences when such darkness is allowed to flourish unchecked. It prompts us to ponder the complexities of human nature, the depths of depravity that some can descend into, and the vital role of societal vigilance in preventing such atrocities. In the end, the story of Charles Ng is a chilling testament to the sheer brutality that humans are capable of. It's a tale that, despite its resolution, leaves us with lingering questions and haunting implications, a grim reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the enduring impact of such monstrous acts. Thanks for listening. This has been Serial Killers with Ben Carter. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.